I can start the recording, Paul, as well.
Thank you. And it is setting up.
How about Gary Steen? Would that be him?
Could be.
It sounded like Gary talked.
Can you hear me? This is Gary Steen.
Yes, Gary.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the video stream to start. There we are. Okay, we are live, and let me make one more change here so we can identify, instead of a question mark,
Gary
Supervisor Steen, whose name is hopefully now spelled correctly.
It is. Great. All right.
I'll take your word on it.
All right. Good afternoon. Sorry for all the confusion and problems we are having. It seems we've had, excuse me, that we've had problems with Zoom, plus a number of people have lost their internet with Spectrum being down. So anyway, we're going to try to battle through this. This is the executive committee meeting, July 22nd, 2020. So we will have Mr. Miller call the roll.
And Mr. Miller will do his best here. Chairman Bartlett.
Here.
Supervisor Maves.
Here.
Supervisor Quinn.
Here.
Supervisor Johnson.
Here.
Supervisor Morehouse.
Here.
Supervisor Anderson.
Here.
Supervisor McCullough.
Here.
Supervisor Steen.
Here.
Supervisor Headland.
Here.
Supervisor Tripp.
Here.
Who did I leave out? Yeah, I got Supervisor Morehouse. I think I got you, did I not?
Yes, sir.
That's what I thought. I think that's everybody. I think we have a full house and a quorum.
All right. Approval of the minutes. Has anybody had a chance to look at the minutes and would like to make a motion to approve?
Supervisor
I so
McCullough
move.
here. Oh, I will second.
Okay. And
I'm sorry, who moved?
Gary, I think.
Gary.
So I have Supervisor Steen moving, Supervisor McCullough second.
Any questions or discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
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 It's approved. I think it was unanimous. All right. Staff reports. We'll start with the review of the July 29th, 2020 County Board agenda. Mr. Miller.
Okay, you should have received the draft agenda for the meeting on July 29th. Just looking at what we have in terms of report of your county manager. Of course, we'll get an update on COVID-19. The preview was in today's email blast to the effect that we are experiencing something of a surge here. Our numbers have doubled in 10 days. And they're going up even yet today. So the bottom line is this pandemic is not over. We will get a first draft of the fiscal year 21 budget levy status report. That will probably not be included in the packet of materials that will be sent to board members tomorrow because we're still pulling it together, but it will be distributed in advance of the meeting itself. One of the issues that I would like some feedback from the committee on is the form of that delivery. Our preference would be to deliver it electronically, and then only those who have some problems receiving it electronically, we will make a hard copy available, as opposed to making 35 or 40 hard copies of the draft budget. We'd like to do it primarily electronically, but I'm getting feedback from this committee on that. So I'll turn that over to you, Supervisor Bartlett.
All right. You mean the question of
The
whether-
question, electronic versus
Okay.
hard copies.
So any discussion on that? Any thoughts?
I'll weigh in, Chairman. Bartlett. This
All
is
right.
Supervisor Morehouse.
Yes.
I have, assuming that Spectrum comes back online, I have absolutely no problem with getting it electronically. In fact, I would prefer it.
Thank
All
you.
right.
I will agree with that. Supervisor McCullough here. Honestly, electronic is just much simpler to work with.
I prefer it also, Supervisor Bartlett.
All right. Anybody else?
Yes, this is Supervisor May. Is electronic is fine with me.
All right. Anybody else?
Anderson's electronic is fine.
Okay.
Quinn is fine.
Anybody else? If not, it sounds like the majority are fine with it being electronically. So that's probably what we'll get.
Thank you all for that. I appreciate the feedback. Of course, we'll cover under my reports the purchase orders of over $40,000. One thing that's not on your draft agenda, but that is on our agenda today, that I will add to my report for the county board on the 29th, is in the Neighbors of Dunn County bond debt refinancing. You'll recall that we initiated the question of refinancing the remaining 13 point fill in the blank $1 million worth of outstanding bonds for the neighbors, which were issued in 2012. We approached the idea of refinancing them perhaps for savings at the beginning of the year, and then COVID hit and markets went nutty. And then last month, the county board agreed to grant to staff, primarily your county manager and your CFO, the authority to pull the trigger on a refinancing, provided the projected savings could be locked in at $750,000 or greater. What I want to report to the board, and I'm reporting to the executive committee right now, is that we have pulled that trigger, and what we're locking in on a direct sale is an anticipated savings of $1.2 million.
Wow,
Oh,
great.
good.
So we think
Excellent.
we think it's a good deal.
That's great.
We've filled out the paperwork, so really appreciate the wisdom of the board in trusting staff to make this move, because it was a time sensitive move, but we've got it filled in. Is there anything, Keith Stry, our CFO, is there anything I'm leaving out?
I'd just like to point out that the parameters resolution that the county board approved had multiple minimum criteria. The dollar amount you mentioned wasn't specifically listed, but there was a percentage of savings and other criteria, and all of those criteria were met or significantly exceeded. This actually ends up being, if you remember the bouncing ball, where it went from 700 to 750,000 down to $500,000 or less to over $1 million. This has been the high point, so it was really prudent that we did the waiting game, waited for the market to stabilize out. But in the end, the county will realize significant savings. Savings won't be realized until starting in 2023. This is an advanced refinancing, but the timing is right. So
Very good.
Unless there are any other questions on that point, getting back to the draft agenda for the July 29th meeting of the Dunn County Board, our reports will include the outside auditor's report on our fiscal year 19. That is also something that may not be in your packets when we send out information tomorrow, but we will get them to, you will have something before the meeting itself to review. We'll also, work with the auditor, April Anderson, has talked with you many times over the years on keeping it concise and high level, because we will be having a virtual meeting, hopefully one that runs a lot more smoothly in terms of setup than this one did. We will also have in the packet the annual reports from Human Services and Environmental Services. And then, of course, the items coming from this committee and the other standing committees, which we will review later in this meeting. Is there, the one thing that I do need input again from this committee on is reports of standing committees. Are there any chairs of our standing committees who want to make a oral report to the full county board on the 29th?
Supervisor Anderson?
Thank you, Chairman Bartlett. I'm thinking that the biggest report could be used in an announcement time later about broadband forward certification rather than a report. Would that be okay, Chairman Bartlett?
Yes, that should work.
Mr. Chairman, this is Supervisor
Yes.
Morehouse. I do have some data about the COVID CARES funding that's coming into the health department, but maybe that's something that Paul could cover in his report.
Yeah, he could maybe cover that in 7A.
Yeah.
I will work with KT Gallagher, our public health officer, to get the details on the CARES funding so that I can talk with some level of intelligence on it.
Yeah. Okay, good. There are documents available. So
Thank you. Any other committees that want to be able to make or feel it important to make an oral report at the public meeting of the county board on the 29th?
Chair Bartlett, this is Brian Johnson, Supervisor
Yes.
Johnson. I don't feel as if the neighbors has much, it's just mainly COVID. I think Paul can probably cover most of that with his report.
Okay, thank you. Well, it doesn't sound like there's any others.
This is Supervisor Maves, and I don't think I need to make a report because basically we're going to be acting on a lot of the things that I would be reporting on anyway. So
Right.
I don't think I need to make a report.
Supervisor Tripp, I see you. Did you have a comment?
No, judiciary and law hasn't met.
Okay. All right. If there's nobody else, then we will do the one with announcements and the other one with the COVID-19 update stuff. Okay, moving on.
Okay, so under staff reports, COVID-19 I've already touched on. By the way, in terms of the neighbors, what I'll say then, and I hope it's true next Wednesday, we still have had no cases of COVID-19 among our residents at the neighbors. It continues the staff continues to do a very thorough job of protecting some of our most vulnerable citizens. For the fiscal year 21 budget status, as we've alluded to, the budget books, which will contain the draft budgets, that is the ones that were submitted by the departments and the divisions that were initially vetted by your CFO and county manager. It'll be the first draft will be distributed to the county board on the 29th. In August, each of the standing committees will be asked to review those draft budgets for the departments and the divisions and make recommendations back to the executive committee, this committee, which acts as our finance committee as well. And then in September, the finance committee will act to pull together a more refined and balanced budget. The initial draft budget is out of balance, as it always is in the first go around, to the tune of, I'm going to make up a number here, I think it's $1.2 million. Mr. Stride, can you correct me on that?
Actually double that. The
Two-
tax levy
2.4.
increase was 2.4 million in the
Right.
initial asks.
Yes, okay, that's correct. So $2.4 million. So there is a gap to make up. But as those of you who are supervisors who have been on the board for a long time know, there's still a lot of moving parts. We still don't have some of the information finalized from the states, and we have some decisions to make regarding priorities and uses of funds and where we want to put our resources. So $2.4 million sounds alarming, but it's not out of hand with what we have faced at this stage of the budget process. In any event, as I said, in September, the executive committee will be looking to produce a balanced budget, and we are on schedule for a November adoption. And this is a good time to point out to everybody, the November meeting is November 10, which means that our executive committee, our county board meeting in October has to be earlier than the 21st in order to make the notification requirements. I believe it's October 14 is what we're shooting for that October meeting, which means that this committee will be meeting the week before that on October 7. If you haven't already marked your calendars to that effect, you might want to do so. Everything will be shifted up 1 week. It's just the way that the mandated November meeting takes place. So please be aware of that. And we finally, after the budget status, we already talked about the NDC debt refinancing, and that concludes my staff report for the committee.
All right, thank you. Moving on, consideration for actions taken by the executive committee, tablets for supervisors, digital transformation of government. We discussed this a little bit, put it off to list meeting discussion. Who would like to start? What are your feelings?
If I may also prompt,
Mr. Miller.
if I may prompt the committee, Eric Edgeberg, our Chief Information Officer, has also been looking at this. What we're likely to recommend is laptops for board members if you choose to do this, and to roll that into our capital financing for the year, which we'll be addressing through the budget process. It will take some infrastructure work as well. We need to run power to the tables where the county board sits. That's assuming we ever meet in person again. But the idea of the laptops, again, is to standardize the delivery of electronic documents. And that's what the reference to the digital transformation of government is. There's still a great many things, as you all know, that we do that wouldn't be out of place in the 20th century, maybe even in the 19th century. And so making a move away from paper copies is something that is a long-term goal for the county. And this is a step in that direction. If we standardize the equipment that board members utilize, we can standardize the programs that they utilize, we can standardize the security that we utilize, and streamline the delivery of information and communication. That's what the purpose of this inquiry is about. If I may, with your permission, Supervisor, or I'm sorry, Chairman Bartlett, I believe Eric Edgeberg, yes, Eric is online. Eric, is there anything to add here?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Clicking. So two things. The cost of laptops is approximately $37,500. They're Dell Latitudes. They do have a life. The battery life is about 10 hours. So I think that could alleviate necessarily having power at the tables. You could, if you bring them charged, you could have a period of about 10 hours of useful life on them. The other part of that is if they're utilized just not for document reviewing, but if you used it for Zoom meetings, email, and all of your activities. And if we do have $725,000 available through the routes to recovery, which is the CARE funding. And one of the sections is 3.14 telework. So it probably would be appropriate to use those funds if we have enough to cover all the activities of the county that could be done to supplement or to pay for the cost of the laptops.
And we are, in fact, staff is investigating every opportunity to avail ourselves of the $750,000 that has been allocated through the CARES Act for potential reimbursements for COVID-related expenses. And I don't think that it's at all playing the games. I think it's very obvious the tie-in for the need for laptops and delivery of electronic services in light of COVID-19 having mandated these kinds of meetings.
If you don't mind, this is Supervisor McCullough. I
Supervisor McCullough.
Thank you. I would strongly support this. I have at this point, as someone who does all of my primary work in New York and live here in Dunn County, I've spent much of the last 20 years slowly updating and working online. And I think this would be a lovely chance for us to move the county forward and also to separate my two spheres of work. I think this is a great idea. I strongly approve.
Supervisor Steen.
I
Did you
didn't
have some-
offer. No, I didn't offer anything.
Okay.
Chair
I saw you were unmuted, so I thought you had something to say.
Chair
Anyone?
Bartlett?
Yes, Supervisor Johnson.
Yes, I have a question. You're talking laptops. I'm not very tech savvy, but laptop versus tablet. Are we looking at laptop or tablet? I see it says
Laptop.
It would be a laptop.
a bigger one.
Yes.
I'm not very tech
Tablets-
savvy, so.
The tablets don't have the degree of functionality that we would be looking for the
Okay.
delivery and for facilitating these kinds of remote meetings.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Chairman Bartlett.
Yes, Supervisor Tripp.
I just want to share an experience I had with this. The WCA board 2 years ago bought iPads for each member. And during the meetings since then, I've observed that of the 29, just happens to be 29 members of that board as well. Of the 29 members, I think there are 3 of us that bring those laptops to meetings, maybe 4. About 5 or 6 others bring their own personal devices, and the majority of those members still rely on paper materials. Now, I don't know how that translates to our situation. I just thought I'd share that. I think there will be a period of education and persuasion that might be involved here.
Great. Supervisor Quinn, you had something?
I was just going to make a similar comment to what Supervisor Tripp said. I know we had trouble before, but those were very inadequate laptops that we had back then. But I think there's some value to having these computers would be asked to be separate, dedicated to county use. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the assumption would be that supervisors would be, if we do meet in person, would be expected to, if at all practical, bring their device with them.
Yes.
Yeah, so we'd be changing our culture a bit, but that would be good. You can motion on this, Mr. Chair?
Not yet,
Not
because
yet.
we have not finalized it.
Yeah.
We'll make it part of the budget process.
Okay.
But I think, you know, moving forward, if we did this, then the county would quit printing all the hard copies of the meetings that we do now. So if, like Supervisor Tripp mentioned, some people like it in paper copy, well, that's understandable, but if they want, they can print it at home if they want, but the county would not do that because we spent the money on the laptops. So we would quit sending out paper copies on things, and you would be expected to use your laptop, or if you wanted to print it at home, you could. Moving forward then. So 6, consideration for reports, resolutions, and ordinances to the county board from the executive committee. A resolution authorizing a countywide referendum on whether the county of Dunn should exceed the levy limit specified under section 66.0602 Wisconsin statutes for the next 5 years for the solid waste and recycling program. I need a motion on this one. Supervisor,
This is Supervisor McCullough. I'm happy to move or second if someone
Okay.
else has gotten in first.
I didn't get a motion yet, so,
Supervisor Maves, I'll make a motion that we move forward with this.
okay, and Supervisor McCullough seconds, sounds good. Discussion, as you can see that the wording has changed a little bit. That changed at the solid waste and recycling meeting. They asked to add hazardous waste in there and also to change it to just capital expenses. Otherwise, it's pretty much what we were talking about before. I don't have it. I can page through it and find it here. Any discussion on this? Supervisor Anderson, did you have something?
No, I didn't. I'm approval.
Okay. Why don't you, I think we're getting back feed from you. Could you mute yourself until you would like to talk, please?
I'm going to do that right now, Chairman.
Thank you. It's *6.
I hit *6.
Oh. It didn't mute and we still get the feedback. Well,
There you go.
There you are. Okay. Anybody else, any other discussion on this? If not, all in favor of moving this to county board, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Resolution, we will move it to county board. 6B, a resolution ending the state of emergency declaration established by Dunn County Resolution number 2020-18. You've got a copy of that resolution. Just to mention, when at our last county board meeting, we voted to either move this back or put it down. It actually would have ended there, but the count with some of the people talking on Zoom was hard to understand, and actually the count might have been a little bit different. But anyway, we did bring it back to county board here, or to executive, and it's our decision on what to do with this, if we want to move it on to county board or not. So I need a motion to move it on to county board. Is there anybody who wants to make? Yes.
Yes, I will make a motion to move it on to county board.
All right.
And Anderson will second it.
Okay, the motion been made and seconded to move this on to county board. Any discussion on this?
Mr. Chair, if I may volunteer,
All right.
just the observation. In my opinion, the continuation of the emergency declaration is about giving the county options. And that's all. We have more options under the emergency declaration than we do without it. In its absence, we face the prospect, should something require us to move quickly, of pulling together a meeting quickly. While under the emergency declaration, we do not necessarily face that same consideration. I will also observe in the time since this emergency declaration has been in place since March, I do not see any abuse of the authorities granted under that declaration. I see only positive things that have come out as a result in terms of the county being able to respond to COVID-19. As we indicated at the beginning of this meeting, this pandemic is not over. I think it is reasonable to assume that there will be other things that will come up that will require us to move swiftly. And then finally, one of the most cogent arguments I heard for perhaps ending the emergency declaration was, well, the citizens of Dunn County elected the county board members to make these kinds of decisions or to govern the county. In my opinion, that's exactly what the county board did by adopting this emergency resolution, exercised its authority to adjust the normal way to respond to an abnormal, extraordinary circumstance. And I hope that the supervisors will bear that in mind.
Supervisor McCullough, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I rather strongly oppose ending the emergency, and it's for three reasons. The first reason is that the numbers of COVID in the county have more than doubled since this was sent down from the county board. Second, we don't have a meeting in August, so under regular order, we wouldn't have a meeting to deal with August issues. And third, school is going to start before we meet again. And I'm guessing that barring some great amount of luck, the start of school and the start again will probably send our numbers up again. And I would prefer that we were in a state to deal with that quickly if that is the case.
Anybody else?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this is Gary Steen here.
Yes. Supervisor Steen.
After the month that's went by and seeing what's going on in the country and seeing what's going on in Wisconsin, I've changed my stance on this, and I would support leaving the power with Paul. I just recently traveled to Illinois, and it kind of drove things home to me. So I would rather err on the side of caution than the other way. So I would be against moving it to the county board.
Thank you. Supervisor
Chairman
Morehouse.
Bartlett?
Yes.
Yeah, I you know, initially when we did this, the emergency declaration, I was a tiny bit skeptical, but I think it has served us very well. I think the evidence that Supervisor Steen and I hear in Health and Human Service Board meetings and in our updates with KT Gallagher suggests that this situation is decidedly going to get worse. And I would very much prefer to have us give us the authority or the ability to be nimble on this decision. So I too am opposed to moving this onto county board.
Okay. Any other speaking towards this? Supervisor Anderson.
No comment.
Okay.
Yeah, Chairman Bartlett, this is
Supervisor Headland.
Headland, you're right. I guess I kind of reluctantly, but I think we almost need to move it back to the county board, being there was an issue where it was already there. And if we had some issues with the system, and not blaming anybody, but just the circumstances we're in, with not getting a clear vote on an issue, I think we need to make a clear vote on the issue. I think that the people's support of staying where we are is fine, but I think we need to make that public for the board. We've already had it there. I think would be a giving ourselves a black eye if we don't take it back to the board.
All right. Supervisor Quinn.
I agree with everything that's been said, and I think that Supervisor Headland's argument is persuasive in that as I recall, and I was confusing, that's for sure, but I thought we were the direction from the board was that it was to be remanded to the executive committee, and the executive committee would bring it back. But either way, I think the board does expect to get it back. So I don't think there'd be a problem with bringing it back and just addressing it.
Okay. Supervisor Johnson.
Yes, I think it's a good idea to bring it back to the full board. That's the way I kind of understood it also.
All right. Any other speaking to this?
Chairman, I have a question.
Yes.
Is it possible to get a feeling or a vote from the executive committee or forward it to the county board as a whole with a recommendation to support it or not support it? I mean, to vote to end the declaration. You understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I think I do, and I guess if we move it to the county board, we are recommending to end the deck. End it.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Mr. Miller.
And Corporation Counsel can correct me. There is nothing that compels this committee to forward a recommendation or a resolution rather to end the emergency declaration. This committee could forward a resolution with the opposite if that's the consensus, and it still gets to the county board, which addresses Mr. Supervisor Headland's point. But it also would reflect, if that were the majority opinion of this committee, the opinion of this committee, so that what would be in front of the board in that case would be a resolution to continue the emergency. Perhaps Mr. Lane can help us clarify the Robert's rules on that.
Yeah, essentially, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Essentially, that's correct. This was not a matter that came from committee to the county board, so it's not being returned to the committee for further work. The county board, it was an issue that came up, and the county board has essentially assigned a task to this committee to revisit the issue. I think whatever form the resolution takes, it isn't necessarily an endorsement of the action. As you're all familiar with the tenets of parliamentary procedure, we often make a motion in order to explore and discuss an issue. People who make motions are allowed to vote against it. So this isn't necessarily an endorsement or a recommendation that the county board do anything. You're bringing a resolution that is anticipating action. It's subject to amendment by the county board through discussion. And amendment could result in all the wording being changed to, the exact opposite outcome. It's a matter of bringing it back to the county board for all of the elected officials, all the elected supervisors of Dunn County to participate in the discussion of whether this resolution should pass or not, whether the emergency declaration should continue or not.
In other words, endorsement of forwarding this resolution to the county board does not constitute endorsement of its contents.
I agree with that statement.
Okay.
I mean, often that is the case, but like I said, people make motions and second them in order to bring a matter onto the floor for discussion and debate, and ultimately they can vote against it if they wish.
Chairman Bartlett, this is
Yes,
Tripp.
Supervisor Tripp.
While I'm sure that the Corporation Counsel is correct in his interpretation, and Mr. Miller is also correct that that's what can be done, my impression of the situation is that if indeed we bring this back to the county board, the majority of those board members not on this committee will assume that it is with an endorsement for passage, because that's the standard. That's the standard by which we operate in most cases.
And
so,
I guess
being cognizant of Supervisor Headland's comment, and I think he's correct, I would suggest that if we bring this back to the board, it is with the provision that we do not endorse, and that be clearly stated in some fashion.
Right. I think that would be the best, because if we bring this back, as Mr. Miller suggested, maybe bringing it back, endorsing the declaration, we haven't done anything. So if we want to bring this to the county board, we should bring it to the county board, ending the declaration, and decide if we want to endorse that or not. If the executive committee would like to say we do not endorse this, we would like to keep the declaration of state of emergency going, then we should state that.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Supervisor Maves.
Yes, I would like to withdraw my motion to move it forward as it is stated here, because I do believe that we should keep it in play for all the reasons that have been mentioned. And the only reason that I brought it up first off was I agree totally with Mr. Headland, Supervisor Headland, that there was confusion, and I've heard some comments made about the final vote. I just wanted to get it brought up again, and but if we need to change the wording, that would be fine, but at this time I will withdraw my motion to present it to the county board.
Okay. We had someone make a second.
Anderson.
Anderson, all right.
As making a second, I will then withdraw it, but I'm waiting for another motion then, as Supervisor Maves would like, because I do want it brought before the full board.
Okay.
Chairman?
Yes.
I would make a motion that we advance this to the board as a whole with the recommendation that we keep our declaration in place.
All right.
Is that a proper motion?
I believe so, Supervisor Steen. I think that sums it up, what we've been leaning towards. Is there a second to that?
I'll second it.
Supervisor Johnson seconds. Any discussion on doing it this way?
Can that be clarified, please, for the record? The motion?
The motion is that we would bring the resolution ending the declaration of the state of emergency to the county board with a recommendation from the executive committee that we do not end the declaration.
Okay, and what I would do in drafting or putting it on the agenda then is it would read from the executive committee, resolution ending the state of emergency declaration established by Dunn County Resolution Number 2020-18. And then I think in parentheses, the executive committee moved that this resolution not be adopted, and close the parentheses. That would be on the agenda. It would memorialize, should this motion that's right now in front of us prevail, it would memorialize the recommendation of the committee on the resolution that will be in front of the board.
Any discussion? Supervisor Anderson?
No, I don't have any questions. I guess I didn't understand why we had to have that at the end, but I'm okay with that.
Okay. Well, that's what the motion was, so. Any other discussion?
Supervisor McCullough
Supervisor
here.
McCullough, yes.
I might suggest, for clarity of language, that we move this forward as a motion to the full board to continue the state of emergency, with the parentheses being this is a response to the motion to end the state of emergency. Just simply, that strikes me as a clearer way to do it, but I can see arguments either way.
I understand that, and I think it's more clear also. I agree with that totally. The thing is, if we did that and it doesn't pass, there's nothing else is going to happen. So it's going to stay in place until our September board meeting at the earliest, and it runs out the end of September. So I'm trying to consider the supervisors that may not have the same point of view as mine. I think it should stay in place. So I would love to bring that to the county board, but I think it's taking the supervisors that have an opposite stance. I think it's taking their right away completely. And
That seems reasonable to me.
And that's why I like this, what we're doing here. Any other discussion?
Yeah,
Supervisor Steen.
This is
Supervisor Headland, sorry.
okay. Yeah, so we're going to leave it the way that Mr. Miller has suggested. Is that, am I correct with that? Okay.
I think
you,
that
sir.
would work very well, that it will be right in the agenda that the executive committee recommends not ending the declaration of the state of emergency. Now that I guess I'm assuming that we're going to vote and that's going to pass, because that's the way most of the speaking has been.
No, that's good. Thank you. I guess that was the outcome I was hoping for.
Okay.
That we were addressing the issue and bringing it back, and glad to
Right.
recommend that this is the way we go.
Right. If the majority of the county board votes to end it, it will be ended. Supervisor Morehouse, did you have something?
No,
Okay.
I did not.
All right.
Thank
All
you.
right, for the purpose of this executive committee, then what's in front of you is the motion from Supervisor Steen, seconded by Supervisor Johnson, to move the resolution ending the state of emergency declaration forward to the county board, with the clear note that the executive committee recommends the resolution not be adopted.
All right. Are we ready to vote? Any other discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. We're going to move it forward with that note. Moving forward. Let's see. Resolution regarding funding of technical colleges. I was asked by Mr. Nichols to put this on. I felt that we could discuss it. It's on our agenda in case we decide we want to bring a resolution forward. He was asking for a referendum. We have many options. We can do a referendum like he was asking and suggesting, or we can put it on our legislative agenda, or we could ask the WCA to endorse something like this. I guess I feel that one county by themselves, I think we need help in this if we're going to change it. He feels strongly that technical college funding is taxation without representation. I understand where he's coming from. He feels that I think he feels that technical colleges should be funded like the university system. So with that, I'll open it up to discussion.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Supervisor Steen.
Yeah, I've had several discussions with Terry, and part of the thing that bothers him is that the Tech College Board is appointed, they're not elected.
Right.
And therefore there's no control really. And he just feels that's an unfair way of doing things because at all other levels, schools are, the people that make the decisions are elected. So that was where he's coming from. And I tend to agree with him.
Right.
Mr.
Any other
Chairman.
discussion? Supervisor?
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Anderson?
Thank you. Well,
Okay.
you all know I came through that whole system. And while I respect a great deal of what Mr. Nichols says about this, all the members are appointed by the county board chairs. And so you have an opportunity to appoint. And you build this board up by people that have interest and particular areas that will fit into the technical college system. And I firmly believe that it's worked for many, many years and it ought to stay this way. Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion? Supervisor Quinn, did you have?
Yes, I am also sympathetic to Mr. Nichols' concerns, and I think he raises some good points. And we have not really even included this in our, I don't think, I don't believe we've included this in our legislative agenda ever.
No.
It seems to me that would be the place to start, would be to see whether we have support to put it forward on our legislative agenda, and then try and move it, as you said, into the view of other counties through the Counties Association. I think it would be appropriate for us to take some position on this, but I'm not sure a referendum is the best choice.
Right. Supervisor Morehouse, did you have something or?
I really don't, although I think,
Okay.
I mean, I have heard Mr. Nelson talk about this a lot. I think a referendum is decidedly not the way to go if we are going to do something about this. I second Supervisor Quinn in that it belongs in our legislative agenda.
All right. Anyone else?
Supervisor May is here.
Super.
I also agree with Supervisor Quinn and Morehouse that it should go through the legislative agenda, and we'll work that avenue.
All right. Any other discussion? If not, and I haven't seen a motion for anything, that we will push it towards our legislative agenda. Any other discussion? If not, that's what we'll do then. Did I miss something? Okay. Moving on then. 6D, resolution approving the FY 2020 budget adjustment for the Health and Human Services Department. And Mr. Miller, do you want to speak to this?
Sure, and it's fairly self-explanatory, as many of these are. These are increased revenues from grants, and the budget adjustment will allow the expenditure of those additional revenues.
And I need a motion for this.
I'll move approval of the Health and Human Services budget adjustment.
Supervisor Morehouse moves. Second, please.
I'll second it. I'll second it,
Supervisor-
Gary Steen.
Okay, I think Supervisor Headland spoke first, didn't he?
I wrote down
Oh, that's
Supervisor
good.
Steen, he wins.
Oh, okay. Supervisor Steen wins, I guess. All right. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Moving on to 6E, a resolution approving FY 2020 budget adjustment for Environmental Services Department. I need we can listen to Mr. Miller, or I need a motion, one or the other.
So moved.
Okay, Supervisor McCullough moves.
Second, Quinn.
Supervisor Quinn seconds. Now, Mr. Miller, do you want to
Yeah.
hit on this?
Sure, just really quickly, again, fairly self-explanatory. This is a $35,410 grant related to the Dunn County Snowmobile Association. It's a pass-through grant. The resolution will allow us to receive the money and pass it through.
All right. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Moving on to 7. Preview reports, resolutions, ordinances coming to the county board from the standing committees. From the facilities committee, we have a resolution approving an amendment to the lease for the Red Cedar Racing. You should all have a copy of that. I need a motion for that. Supervisor Maves?
Yeah.
No,
so
you
make-
don't. You don't need a motion.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. This is just a report. These are, okay, I'm wrong. Questions? Supervisor Mays, did you have anything you wanted to say about this?
No, basically
Okay.
the reports that was sent out, I feel is self-explanatory. If there are any questions, please ask them so we will answer it. It was a lengthy discussion, and I felt a very good discussion. So if anybody does have any questions, please ask them now, and we'll answer your questions.
Supervisor Steen, did you have a question?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Chairman Bartlett, if I may, just for clarification,
Yes.
I did get one question earlier in the week from a supervisor. This resolution is not a revisit of what we did last month. It is an extension of the lease for Red Cedar Racing, basically granting an additional year to the current contract because of the lost year 2020, and then adding one more year because the Racing Association will maintain the grounds this year for us, even while the races are not taking place under the same terms as before. So basically, it just pushes out our existing contract by 2 years, and for good reason.
All right. If there's no other questions, moving on to 7A2, resolution approving an amendment to the lease of the Menominee Youth Hockey Association. Anything you would like to speak to here, Mr. Maves?
Just here again, it's written out very well, and this actually all started way back when they put in the holding pond. Part of it was the in the legal terminology back then, some things got misrepresented, and so we got the verbiage all straightened out. And it's also bringing things up to date as far as the rent issue. So it's actually, we're bringing things up to date that's been lingering out there for quite a while.
All right, thank you. Any questions or discussion on this? Questions, I guess, mostly. Supervisor Anderson, did you have a question?
I think maybe with the youth association, I'm the supervisor that asked our county manager that question. We're extending the lease to, I don't have that copy in front of me right now, to 3 years, right? Is that correct?
Are you talking about the hockey association lease?
Yeah, I wanted to get back to that. I didn't get a quick chance.
Or the Red Cedar Speedway.
I'm sorry. Well, okay, yeah, maybe I'm totally confused on that. I'm sorry.
Are you asking about the Red Cedar Speedway?
No, I'm asking about the hockey.
Okay, a hockey association. This isn't changing the timetable at all.
Oh, that was my question. Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion? Questions? Seeing none, we will move on to 7B1, resolution amending the employee handbook regarding total base wage and other forms of compensation. Speaking to this,
I can explain it.
Mr. Miller will explain this one.
This is basically a housekeeping measure. The committee will recall that the Committee on Administration oversaw the shift on one of our compensations from an other post-employment benefit to a 401A. What this amendment to the employee handbook does is throughout the handbook is replace the OPEB, other post-employment benefit, with the 401A reference. So it's a housekeeping measure.
Any questions? Supervisor Steen?
No.
Okay. And this doesn't change anything. It's all the same. So, okay. There are no other questions. Moving on to 7B2, resolution amending the inventory of job classes. Mr. Miller, would you like
Sure.
to explain this too?
Again, coming from the Committee on Administration, we have something called a psychiatric social worker, but a social worker is a certified position, whereas the people that are occupying it do not necessarily have to have social worker certification. So it's changing the title from psychiatric social worker to licensed clinical therapist.
Any discussion? If not, moving to reports of the standing committees. And I will just, I'll start on the screen the way they appear to me. So I'll start with Mr. Supervisor Maves is right next to me on my screen.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
He's also closest to your heart.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, not only did we, some of the items that we've already acted upon here and stuff, the fair is actually starting up today. So it's not the traditional fair as we all know, but they are moving forward. And so that's a good thing. As far as operation, the COVID projects, the plexiglass and everything has been completed. We're going to be meeting with Enterprise next month to go over the vehicles that we are leasing, and because of the lack of mileage that's going on them, why they'll probably make a significant difference as far as whether we trade them in or just keep using them. We did put the house up for bids behind the healthcare center, and the first auction that went through was unsuccessful. The person who did want to bid on it was going to cut the house up in 9 sections and move it out, and it was going to take time. So that bid was rejected, and they will be going out for bids again. As far as for energy, we are getting a grant for $200,000 as far as for solar out on the transit building there, as far as putting in the bus chargers and stuff. It's interesting that they call it a $200,000 grant, but it's a 80-20 split. So actually we're only going to get $160,000. So, but still, we're moving forward on the solar. In a couple of weeks, the parking lots will be paved, so that'll be looking good. And our next meeting will be August 26th. That's my report.
Thank you. Next on my list here is Supervisor Quinn.
Thank you. PR&D has met, I think, twice, and mostly looking at the revisions, our long-term plan for revision of ordinances. We've been going through a comprehensive look at the land division ordinance, which is very complicated and lengthy. And so staff has been working hard on it. And we, as a committee, have started going through that, and also continuing to work on the comprehensive land use plan for the county. Other than that, pretty much normal business.
Thank you. Next up, Supervisor Johnson with the neighbors.
Okay, thank you, Chair Bartlett. The neighbors is continuing to follow the current public health crisis at this time and has not had any positive cases in either staff or residents. The state has issued guidance in regards to limited outside visitation and beauty salons. And the neighbors are working through this guidance, working to create a plan to follow these policies. They have seen significant amount of positive employment and activity in the past few weeks and are pleased to report that they've had 3 orientation cycles in the month of July. The recent the census for the month of June is at 121. And that's about all I have, sir.
Thank you. Next on my screen would be Supervisor McCullough with Highway and Transit.
On transit, I don't have anything to report. I believe everything is running normally there within the confines of COVID, of course. In terms of highway, routine maintenance is on schedule. All of our construction projects are currently on schedule. The only thing out of the ordinary at all would be the June 20th and 29th storms, and those provided us with very little damage. So everything is looking pretty good in my bailiwick. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next on my screen would be Supervisor Anderson.
Jim, you're muted.
There you go.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Each one of our meetings, of course, we always have 3 things that we talk about, and that is broadband. And as you know, now Dunn County is broadband forward certified officially. And that is great news, which means now the Bloomer Telegraph that's installing fiber in the town of Grant and Colfax is moving forward. We'll have a lot more good news to report on that shortly. The big thing, of course, that's happening is with Dunn County Economic Development Corporation, and as you know, right now we're in a big change and things going on with an interim, and we're moving. We're moving slowly on that. It's very difficult right now. I will have a full report for you at our next meeting because our next CR&T meeting we will be talking about our budget request and what our recommendations are for the Dunn County Economic Development Corporation next year. And finally, UW Extension is the other big one, and we're requesting that the 3-county area here maybe look at somebody from Extension that could help us head up broadband, and not just for Dunn County, but for Eau Claire and Chippewa County. And that way, we would save a lot of money because we would be sharing the expense of one UW Extension agent that would be having broadband as part of their responsibilities. We think that's a pretty good way to go, and because broadband is huge right now, bigger than ever with all the shut-ins and what's going on. So we got to keep that ball moving. That concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Next on my screen would be Supervisor Headland with Administration Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I may start out by asking, or actually making a comment to Mr. Anderson, how important that mission of broadband is. And to give you a little side note, my mother-in-law is moving into Boyceville this weekend from north of Carnersville, and her phone outage averaged about 40% of the time in that area, which means whether you got phone or internet with the phone company, you got nothing. The last serviceman that was up there last week said that phone company doesn't plan to do anything. The lines are old up here. And he says, I don't know what they're going to do for the people up here, if anything. Going north of Carnersville, County Road K, I guess good luck to our residents up there. As far as admin, unfortunately or fortunately, I was out of town on a fishing trip with family. had a great time, and Mr. Leonow did run the meeting. But I'd like to make two comments to the rest of the committee here. One is that I very much appreciate the written reports we are receiving from our county departments. And so if you want to see what's going on with admin, just click on to the packet for our meetings, and you will see some really good written reports from our staff, our clerk, our treasurer, CJCC, IT, our county manager, Heather Marie, and so forth. And then just one second is that obviously there's elections coming up this year, and there were 3 candidates who filed papers and had enough endorsement to get on the ballot. Our county clerk, Julie Wathke, is the only one. She is running unopposed. Register of Deeds, Heather Kuhn, is also rerunning, and she is running unopposed. And our treasurer, Doris Meyer, is also running again, and she is running unopposed. And that concludes my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next on my list would be Supervisor Morehouse with Health and Human Services Committee.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We met a month ago. We are meeting again tomorrow for our regular monthly meeting. We had a report on our local COVID-19 response and situation for the health department. It continues to be all COVID all the time. We talked about the Wisconsin situation as well. We also had a short discussion on the health department's current communicable disease investigation infrastructure, which is underfunded. And that's a discussion I think that we will be continuing. We also had in the spirit of educating committee and board members about the functions of our 2 departments. We had a really excellent report from our behavioral services department about issues they've encountered during the pandemic. And finally, and importantly, we talked about the federal CARES money that's coming in. The health department has about 5 different sources of COVID CARES funding, all of which, except one, expire in December of this year. There is money for local testing. There is money for contact tracing and monitoring of cases. That money is going to depend on population parameters and the number of tests, so obviously on incidence. There is money for epidemiology and lab work so that we can better detect routes of transmission. And finally, there is money for ongoing emergency preparedness planning. That source of money extends through September of 21. So all of these funds are somewhat dependent on parameters of service, but we could be eligible for $514,993, so about $500,000. And we will undoubtedly hear tomorrow if there are additional sources and if there is additional clarification on this. That's my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And Supervisor Tripp, Judicial and Law. Supervisor Tripp, if you're there, you're muted. Supervisor Tripp, you're on mute.
How about now?
Yes.
Okay. I had to do it 3 times, so I understand when Supervisor Anderson wasn't getting immediate results earlier. By the way, I have to ask him how come he's taking this conference call while he mows his lawn. But anyway, we're in the final stages of updating our hazard mitigation plan, and so we'll have that coming forward fairly soon. The Judiciary and Law Committee hasn't met. We'll meet next Monday. And one of the hot topics, obviously, is the public reaction to policing. So I'm sure that's going to be on our agenda as a discussion item for the next few meetings. Other than that, nothing to report. Thank you.
Thank you. Did I miss anybody? I don't believe so. Any announcements? I'm not seeing any announcements, so I will adjourn this meeting, and if I don't see you before, I will be seeing you at County Board a week from tonight.
Mr. Chair?
Yes,
Still
Supervisor
there.
Headland.
This is, yeah. Are we still on for tomorrow? Our meeting is, I guess, I would plan to be there to run the meeting, and hopefully we'll be able to do something with it.
For the admin meeting?
Having meeting tomorrow, yeah.
Yes, I would expect that you're expected to be here, and that will be a virtual meeting also from